All right, Astro 15 was last night, but I skipped it. So today's Astro 15, we could think of it like a bonus episode. César Cedeño, August 2nd, 1972, Reds and Astros in the Astrodome. This is one of those games where the box score feels too neat. First place Cincinnati comes in with the better record, the bigger name value, and Gary Nolan on the mound with the best earned run average in the National League. Houston counters with Don Wilson. By the time the night is over, Cesar Cedeño has hit for the cycle. Don Wilson has thrown a complete game. And the Astros have beaten the Reds 10-1. In a game that feels bigger than one game. This isn't just a cycle game. It's a pennant race game. It's a big red machine game. And it's a trade revenge game. It's also a Don Wilson game, and maybe most of all, it's a game where a 21-year-old rookie center fielder, for one night, looks like he might become the biggest thing in the National League. Welcome back to the Astro 100. I'm documenting one game per player until I reach 100. Today, Astro 15, César Cedeño. Before we get into the game itself, helps to understand the shape of the moment. The Reds came into this night in first place in the NL West. They're 58-38. They're not yet fully mythologized as the big Met machine that we remember, but they're already serious. Johnny Bench is there. Joe Morgan's there. Tony Perez is there. Sparky Anderson leading from the dugout. This is a heavyweight team. They're a team that expects to win the division, and they're already carrying themselves like October belongs to them by right. The Astros come in at 54-45. They're 5.5 games back. They're still alive and still dangerous. They're still relevant, but they're not the polished machine that Cincinnati is. The big orange machine. Houston's a little stranger than that, a little rougher, a little more emotional. They're a little unstable. There's talent, a lot of talent. Jim Wynn, Lee May, Doug Rader, Don Wilson, and center field, Cesar Cedeño, who is still so young that part of the story is simply that he's already this good. Houston lost the first game of this 2-game set, 3-1, the previous night. So this isn't just another August date on the calendar. This is a chance to keep Cincinnati from walking into the Astrodome, taking 2, and widening the gap. Houston doesn't need a nice competitive loss here. Houston needs a punch to the face. It needs something forceful, something that says the standings are real, but not permanent. And the 72 Astros are worth a minute all by themselves because they're one of those teams that can get blurred over by history. They don't win the division. They don't win the World Series, so they risk becoming background. But at the time, this was the best Astros club the franchise had ever put on the field. The offense had more bite than earlier Houston teams. The fences at the Astrodome had been bought in. The team spent real time in the NL West race. They weren't pretending. And they weren't building towards relevant. They were already relevant. Yet, there's tension built into the whole thing because the Astros had just made one of the most important trades in franchise history. On this night, the evidence is standing on both baselines. Before the 72 season, Houston sent Joe Morgan, Cesar Geronimo, Dennis Menke, Jack Bellingham, and Ed Armbruster to Cincinnati. In return, the Astros got Tommy Helms, Lee May, and Jimmy Stewart. And that trade is one of the central ghosts of this game because Joe Morgan is now a Red. Cesar Geronimo is now a Red. So is Dennis Menke, Tommy Helms, and Lee May are now Astros. So when you watch this game, you're not just watching the Reds versus the Astros. You're watching two franchises argue with each other over identity, evaluation, future, and what kind of team each one thought it was building. It gets even more charged when you remember Houston's manager, Harry Walker. Harry Walker is one of the great baseball characters, a former major leaguer, a batting champion, a teacher, a talker, baseball lifer, a man who could explain hitting for hours, possibly days, and probably enjoyed hearing himself do it. He guided the Astros to their first 500 season in 1969 and had him back in the race in 1972. But he was also controversial, difficult, and for some former players, deeply resented. Joe Morgan, years later, had harsh things to say about Walker, and those comments hang over any conversation about this period of Astros history. If you want something that makes you mad, it lives right here. The Astros had talent, real talent. And some of that talent was not merely lost in the normal way that baseball teams lose talent. Some of it was mishandled. Some of it was pushed out. Some of it was made smaller than it should have been. When you look at Morgan in a Reds uniform in a game against Houston, you're allowed to feel irritated on the behalf of the franchise that let that happen. Across the field is Sparky Anderson. Sparky's almost the complete opposite kind of legend. A young guy, Chris Presence, future Hall of Famer, less like a baseball eccentric and more like a foreman of a precision operation. The operation isn't yet at full mythic power in August of 1972, but it's close enough that you can hear it starting to hum. The starting pitchers, this game starts to look almost unfair on paper. Gary Nolan starts for Cincinnati. He's 24, already a star when healthy, and already a pitcher with a major league story that began absurdly early. Drafted out of high school in the majors at the age of 18. A big arm, but fragile. Brilliant when it's right. Coming into this game, he owns the best earned run average in the National League, 1.71. That number is not a typo, 1.71, and it's August. You can understand why Cincinnati feels good about its chances. Don Wilson starts for Houston, and Don Wilson's one of the most compelling pitchers in Astros history. Born in Louisiana, raised in California, converted from infielder to pitcher, armed with live stuff and a mean streak that baseball can use when it wants to flatter a player and can fear when it wants to warn you about him. Wilson already threw 2 no-hitters in his career, and he'd already been an all-star. He had power, edge, and history. With Cincinnati, he liked facing them, maybe more than liked it. Maybe he needed it, because there's an older Don Wilson story that helps here. In 1969, one day after Reds pitcher Jim Maloney no-hit Houston, Wilson came back and no-hit Cincinnati. That's cartoon-level spite. That's baseball pettiness elevated into art. Wilson also reportedly carried a grudge against Reds manager Dave Bristol, who once taunted him as gutless. So even if this game is not packaged as some headline personal feud, Wilson stepped into the mound against Cincinnati, and it wasn't emotionally neutral. Before first pitch, let's also look at the lineup card, because it's ridiculous in a satisfying way. For Cincinnati, you got Pete Rose leading off in left, Joe Morgan at second, Bobby Tolan in center, Johnny Bench catching, Tony Perez at right, first, Cesar Geronimo in right, Dennis Menke at third, Darryl Cheney at short, and Gary Nolan pitching. That lineup contains 3 Hall of Famers right there in the middle, Morgan, Bench, Perez. Not future Hall of Very Good, actual Hall of Famers. And the 2 former Astros, and Geronimo and Menke, only sharpen the edge. For Houston, you have Roger Metzger at short, César Cedeño at center, Jim Wynn in right, Lee May at first, Bob Watson in left. Johnny Edwards is catching, Doug Raiders at third, Tommy Helms second base, and Don Wilson on the hill. That's not as glamorous a card, but it's plenty strong enough. Wynn is one of the great players in franchise history. See? Lee May is a major bat. Bob Watson can hit. Doug Rader can field and contribute. Tommy Helms, one of the guys acquired in this trade, is here in the bottom third. And Cedeño's at the top of the card, second in the order, because Houston increasingly understands what it has. So let's stop hovering over the stage and start play. Top of the first, Don Wilson faces Pete Rose, Joe Morgan, Bobby Tolan. That's not exactly easing into your workday. Rose flies out, Morgan flies out, Tolan walks. Johnny Bench comes up with a man on first, and Wilson gets him to ground out. No score. In the bottom of the first, Gary Nolan begins his night. Roger Metzger grounds out. César Cedeño doubles to center. That's the first signal. Not a siren yet, just a signal. Jim Wynn flies out, and Lee May strikes out. No score. Bottom of the second, Houston threatens a little, then wastes it. Bob Watson reaches. Johnny Edwards pops out, Doug Rader strikes out, and Tommy Helm strikes out. Still no score. If you're Cincinnati, the first 2 innings probably feel fine. Nolan has allowed the double to Cedeño, but no damage. Not really. Wilson's allowed a walk, but also no damage. It still feels like the game is obeying the expected script. Top of the third, Wilson works through Dennis Menke, Darrell Cheney, and Nolan. Still scoreless. Bottom of the third is where the script starts to burn. Tommy Helm singles to left. Now Wilson has a decision, or maybe Harry Walker has one. But either way, the pitcher bunts over and does his job. He lays one down, moves Helms to second. Metzger grounds out, and now there are 2 outs with a man on third. And here comes Cedeño. This is where I can slow down just enough to let you feel the hinge. Because if Cedeño makes an out here, it's just another threat that Houston wasted. Still scoreless. Maybe it's still tense and still waiting. Instead, Cedeño drives one deep to left field. Home run. 2-0 Astros. By itself, that's already a big swing. But what makes this inning turn from good to dangerous is what it comes after. Jim Wynn doubles to left. Lee May doubles to right. And Wynn scores. Just like that, it's 3-0. Now it's not one swing. Now it's a pattern. Now Nolan looks human. And the dome wakes up a little. If you're Houston, the best part is not that you just scored. It's how you scored. Bunt, ground out, home run, double. You got there through sequence, force, and multiple kinds of offense. In the top of the fourth, Wilson goes back to work. He gets Morgan to pop out, Tolan to ground out. Although he allows Bench to single, Perez grounds out, so no damage. In the bottom of the fourth, Houston gets a man on again, but leaves him there. Johnny Edwards makes an out, Doug Rader strikes out, Tommy Helm singles. Then Wilson strikes out, and the score stays 3-0. Top of the fifth, Cincinnati finally answers. Cesar Geronimo grounds out. He strikes out. Then Dennis Menke hits a solo shot to left center. 3-1. And Menke homering here matters because he's one of the former Astros in the same trade. So it's not just the Reds scoring. It's part of Houston's recent past reaching across the field and landing one. At 3-1, the game briefly opens back up. One swing can still change it. One mistake can make it tight. One rally and maybe the whole thing tilts. In the bottom of the fifth is where Houston refuses all that suspense. Roger Metzger opens with a triple. Already rude. Then César Cedeño singles to right, and Metzger scores. It's 4-1. Pause there a second because now Cedeño has a double, a home run, and a single. He's a triple away from the cycle. We're only in the 5th inning. Jim Wynn flies out, Lee May walks, Bob Watson singles to left. The bases are crowded. Johnny Edwards reaches on an infield single. Now the bases are loaded. Doug Rader singles to center. Lee May and Bob Watson both score. Johnny Edwards goes to second, and Rader goes to second on the throw. Suddenly, it's 6-1. Tommy Helms draws an intentional walk, and Wilson grounds out. The inning's over, but it's already done its work. This was the kill shot inning. Houston didn't merely answer Cincinnati's run. Houston's humiliated the idea that Cincinnati was coming back. Metzger tripled. Cedeño singled him in. Traffic everywhere. Rader cashes in 2 more. The Astros put up 3 in the inning, lead 6-1. And in a way, this is a great Doug Rader preview, hiding inside a César Cedeño episode. Because Cedeño is the star, absolutely. But Rader's hit matters. Rader's hit is part of the game turning from excellent into no, this one's over. Top of the 6th. Wilson keeps closing doors. Pete Rose singles. Joe Morgan grounds into a double play. And Tolan pops out. That's a beautiful anti-Reds inning. Single from Red, then erase the whole thing with one swing of the infield. Bottom 6, Houston adds again, because why should Gary Nolan or Jim McLaughlin get to settle down? Roger Metzger singles, César Cedeño grounds out, and that is maybe the only mild disappointment in the entire game, if you're thinking about the cycle. But Jim Wynn doubles to center, Metzger scores, and now it's 7-1, and that matters too, because this is where you stop fully thinking about Cincinnati as a threat. This is no longer tense 4-1 or even 6-1. Now it's 7-1. Wilson's on the mound. The Reds' lineup is shrinking by the inning. In the top of the seventh, Wilson goes 1-2-3, except for a walk. No run. Bottom seven, Houston doesn't score. But it almost doesn't matter. The Reds are out of room. They need a weird inning, then another weird inning, then another. And Wilson's not offering weirdness. Top of the eighth, Pete Rose walks, but the Reds get nothing. Joe Morgan grounds out, Bobby Tolan grounds out. Cincinnati's just spending their outs. And now we get to the eighth inning bottom half. The historic moment, the part of this game most people know, even if they know nothing else. Pedro Bourbon is pitching for Cincinnati. Roger Metzger singles. César Cedeño comes up. At this point, he already has the double from the first, the home run from the third, and the single from the fifth. He needs a triple. And to his credit, Cedeño hits a triple to center. The cycle's complete. Metzger scores 8-1. There are certain achievements in baseball that feel statistical, and certain ones that feel theatrical. The cycle is theatrical. It's a scavenger hunt in public. Everyone understands it immediately. Single, double, triple homer. All four, one game. And on this night, it's not some cosmetic accomplishment in a losing effort or a random extra garnish on an ordinary night. It's happening in the middle of a rout of the first place Cincinnati Reds. Then, why not? Houston keeps going. Jim Wynn hits a sacrifice fly. Cedeño scores 9-1. Liam A. homers to center, 10-1. That's almost comical at this point. Cedeño gets the cycle. Wynn brings him in. May goes deep. 3 more runs. Good night. Top of the ninth, Wilson finishes it. Johnny Bench strikes out. Tony Perez flies out. Cesar Geronimo singles. And Dennis Menke strikes out. Though Geronimo did move to second on a wild pitch. Didn't matter. Final out recorded. Ball game over. Astros 10. Reds 1. Now let's sit with the numbers for a minute because they're clean and pretty. César Cedeño goes 4 for 5. 4 RBI. 3 scored. Cycle. Home run. Triple, double, single. He also gets caught stealing. Which is a little funny because it's the one slightly untidy brushstroke in otherwise perfect painting. Don Wilson throws 9 innings, a complete game, 6 hits, 1 run, 3 walks, 6 strikeouts against Rose, Morgan, Bench, Perez, Geronimo, Menke. That's not some soft complete game against a sleepy lineup on a Thursday. That's a complete game with a lineup full of teeth. Gary Nolan, meanwhile, lasts 4 1/3 innings. He allows 6 runs. Only 1's earned because of defensive help and lack of it and the usual baseball bookkeeping. But whatever the earned run column says, Houston hit him. Houston got to him. Houston made the best earned run average in the league look vulnerable. And this is where the game becomes important beyond the romance of the cycle, because a casual baseball fan can hear cycle and think of it as a novelty, a collectible, a fun stat, a baseball stamp to lick and file away. But this game is better than that. It's a pennant race game against the eventual National League winner. And it's against Gary Nolan, not some emergency starter. It's in the Astrodome, which adds atmosphere and personality. It involves Hall of Famers on the other side, and it's the first cycle in Astros club history. Catcher César Cedeño in the form Houston wanted him in. Explosive, complete, electrifying. And that's why this game matters. Because if you were watching Houston in 1972 and trying to explain to someone what César Cedeño could be, this is the game you would show them. Or in our case, this is the game you would read to them. He wasn't just a fast guy, not just a promising young hitter. And he wasn't just a center fielder with tools. He was everything all at once. He could hit the ball out of the park. He could split the gap. He could run. He could turn contact into damage and change the geometry of the field. He was only 21. Cedeño's backstory makes that even richer. He was born in Santo Domingo in 1951. Grew up in poverty. As a child, he worked in a nail factory with his father. He was signed by Houston as a teenager for a tiny bonus by the standards of what he would later become. He rose quickly because his gifts were obvious. He hit in the minors and reached the majors young. By the time of this game, he was not merely surviving in the big leagues. He was threatening to take a place among the most exciting players in baseball. By the end of 1972, that would be undeniable. He would hit 320, make the All-Star team, and win the first of 5 straight Gold Gloves. He finished 6th in the National League in MVP voting. This game isn't an exception to the season. It's one of the season's loudest summaries. One thing I really like about it is the post-game reaction from him is not soaked in fake grandeur. The quote attached to this game is not, he was specifically trying to hit for the cycle. That's ridiculous. Once he gets 3 hits, he said, he's just trying for a 4th, then 5. It's a great ball player answer. No poetry, no self-coronation. Just, I'm going to try to keep hitting. Meanwhile, the people around him are more than willing to provide the poetry. Inside Houston, there were voices saying this guy might be the best player in the majors. Or maybe someday he would be. One Astros official repeatedly said he would not trade Cedeño even for Johnny Bench. Now, when an organization says something like that, part of it is promotion, part of it's infatuation. Part of it's the private thrill of feeling like you found treasure before anyone else fully agrees. But then you watch a game like this and think, all right, I get it. At least understand why you'd say it. The cycle itself deserves a little extra respect too, because it was the first one in Astros history. The Astros had existed since 1962. This is 1972. 10 full seasons had gone by without one. And it came not from a random bat on the bench or a weird utility day, but from the young center fielder who was increasingly becoming the face of Houston's future. If you were there at the Dome that night, you got to watch a player become larger. Now, what did the game mean to each team after the final out? For Houston, it meant breathing room emotionally, even if it did not dramatically in the standings. They moved to 55 and 45. They stayed within 5 games, and more importantly, they reminded themselves, a race is not a polite fiction. They could still beat Cincinnati. Not just beat them, but flatten them. For Cincinnati, it was only 1 loss. It was an ugly one, but still just 1 loss. And that's the privilege of being a great team. You can absorb humiliation and still keep functioning. To their credit, the Reds did exactly that. They won the division. Then they won the National League pennant. They pushed the Oakland Athletics to 7 games in the World Series. And they lost. But Houston didn't break the Reds there. Houston did expose that they could still be reached. And it's worth emphasizing, Houston seasons after this game did not collapse. The Astros stayed alive. They played good baseball down the stretch. They finished to 84 and 69, at that time the best record in franchise history. Not a trivial fact. It's a very good Astros team. And although they weren't champion or immortal even, they're good. And Cedeño was central to that goodness. Then there's a longer arc of Cedeño's career, which is both impressive and a little melancholy. On the field, he largely justified the hype. For years, he was one of the best all-around players in the National League. Power, speed, defense, arm, presence. He hit for a second cycle later in his career. He piled up seasons that, in another shape of baseball memory, might have been enough to make him a more universally remembered star. But his career, and especially his life, do not unspool cleanly. There were injuries, and there was off-field tragedy. There was a later reputation that became complicated and darker than the bright athletic promise of this moment in 1972. So when I talk about César Cedeño, I don't think he's simply a baseball fairy tale figure. He's more human than that, more gifted and more damaged, maybe more difficult to summarize. But on August 2nd, 1972, none of the later shadows have arrived yet. Or if they have, they haven't taken over the picture. What you have instead is youth and force, a center fielder in his early 20s looking impossible for one night. A player who can make you think baseball might still be capable of manufacturing someone entirely new. And there's another reason a casual baseball fan could fall in love with the sport through a game just like this one. It has range. If you love pitching, Don Wilson gives you a complete game against a powerhouse lineup. If you love offense, the Astros scored 10 hits. The Astros scored 10 runs and collect 16 hits. If you love stars, the Reds bring Hall of Famers to the field. And if you love stakes, not just Porterhouse, this is a division race. And if you love weird old baseball trinkets, you get the cycle. If you love old parks with personality, it's the Astrodome. If you love strange emotional accounting, this game has former Astros and current Astros staring at each other from opposite dugouts. It's rich and has layers and entry points. And if you're new to baseball, it teaches you one of the sport's great truths. Not every important game is a postseason game. Sometimes the game that makes you care arrives on an ordinary day in August, under a roof, in a division race, where a 21-year-old center fielder decides to do nearly every possible thing. So if I was boiling this episode all the way down, I would say this. César Cedeño did not just hit for the cycle on August 2nd, 1972. He gave Houston one of those rare nights where a franchise can look across the field at a giant and think, for a few innings at least, that its own future might be bigger. Before we go, we should point towards Astro 16 next time. It's still greater. Right there. Rader appears in this game in the way he does because even in another player's masterpiece, he still leaves his fingerprints. He drives in 2 runs in that 5th inning surge and helps turn a good Astros lead into a rout. He's not the headline tonight, but he's absolutely part of why the final score looks the way it does. That feels right for a teaser. So next time, Astros 16, Doug Rader, a man who could matter loudly, quietly, defensively, offensively, and sometimes all at once. But tonight belonged to César Cedeño. Astro 15, August 2nd, 1972. Reds 1, Astros 10. A cycle, a complete game, a pennant race, a statement. The first cycle in Astros history, and maybe for one night in Astrodome, a glimpse of what Houston hoped its future might look like. I want to thank you for tuning in. Thanks for watching. This is Astros 15. I'm collecting 1 game per player until I reach 100. And I'm not stopping when I reach 100 either. We're going to do all 124 Major League, National Basketball Association, NHL, and NFL teams. We're doing all 124. That's 12,400 episodes. Should take me until I'm 89 years old. So that's called job security. So even if I'm not getting paid, I still get satisfaction of a job well done. Even if you don't think it's well done. Well, that was me. Now, I hope you enjoyed it. Have a good day.